This has been such a consequential week, and I just came back from Washington, D.C. on Friday night, and I thought I'd make some comments about this week because you saw the violence. I want to give a full disclosure. I was not at the Capitol. I was at the rally hearing President Trump, and if I could just be real, I was stuck in a crowd. I've never been in such a larger crowd in my life. I know crowd size. We did the call with 500,000. I've been at a rock concert with 600,000, so I know crowd size. This was probably the largest crowd I've ever been in, and so it's hard to give an estimation, but it was way over 500,000. And some say 1 million, some say even 2, but I don't know the official. But it was the largest crowd I've been in, and I was stuck, and being stuck for over 4 hours with a small bladder. How many know? Let me know that Papa Ché had to run to the bathroom as soon as it was over. And that's what I did. And then when I got to my hotel room, which was on the way to the Capitol, I was so exhausted. I said, I'm going to take a power nap. And I ended up sleeping through the whole rioting that took place. And so I did not know what happened until I saw it on the news. And so I just want to say we condemn violence of any form and shape. And so I just want you to know that's my position. Having said that, to be with so many people, not to cast aspersion on the whole crowd just because of a handful. And just like, there's a handful of white supremacists, the KKK, but we don't say all white people are guilty of racism as a result of that handful. Are you hearing what I'm saying? So there's always a handful, and unfortunately some Trump followers got caught up in the excitement of the event, and they weren't mature, and they went into the Capitol. And so I'm not condoning them. As President Trump said yesterday in his speech, they will be prosecuted, and he is a president of law and order. Can we thank God for that? Seriously. So, but I want to give you my take on what happened in Georgia and what happened at the Capitol with the Vice President Pence, and then the president's speech of a smooth transition for the next administration. So the way I want to do it is by giving you a spiritual metaphor from the book of Acts. And I want to talk about the Apostle Paul. When Ananias was told to pray for Paul, who was struck blind on the road to Damascus, God said something very interesting about Apostle Paul. He is a chosen vessel, or an instrument, another translation said, of mine, who is to bear my name before Gentiles, and we know that he was the apostle of Gentiles, to kings and to the children of Israel. So we also know that he went to the synagogues first to talk to the Jewish people, and that was his MO, and then he went to the Gentiles. But we gloss over the word kings. He was called to kings. And I want to make a statement. The harvest is among the poor, which is the majority of people in society, the average middle-class person, the deplorables, if you will. We're the deplorables. But transformation happens through kings. And the best example is like William Wilberforce. He was a king. He was a member of parliament. He was a Cambridge graduate. He was an aristocrat in England. And he was able to end the slave trade and slavery in 1807, slave trade and slavery in 1833. So it's transformation. And Lou has said this often, that President Trump is a Wilberforce of our time. He has done more for the cause of the pro-life movement than any other president. He has been the most pro-life president, and we're this close from overturning Roe v. Wade. Seriously, the fact that he has nominated and confirmed 300 federal judges may be the greatest achievement, along with 3 justices that have been confirmed, including Amy Coney Barrett. And by the way, we wouldn't be meeting without the draconian edict of my arrest and all of you being fined if Amy Coney Barrett did not weigh in recently of a Supreme Court giving us the injunction to protect your pastor and you from being arrested. So, we're here secure. By the way, for those who didn't know that, you don't have to worry about it because you're not going to get arrested. We have the Constitution on our side. And so Paul was called to kings. That was his destiny. And so we see him in Acts 26 before King Agrippa, the new king of Israel, and Festus, the governor. He was like Pilate's replacement. And Paul's preaching. And King Agrippa says, you're trying to convict me and get me to be saved? He said, yes, absolutely. I want you to be like me without these chains. And then King Agrippa says something to Festus. He said, if he didn't appeal to Caesar as a Roman citizen, he could have been released just now. In other words, he found him not guilty. And as a result of that, he's now going to Rome under certain conditions. Number one, he's a Roman citizen. And number two, he's been found not guilty. So you see unusual favor on Paul, even on the ship. And what I mean by that is that he's able to bring his companions. Dr. Luke is with him. And they bring food and supply for Paul. And so he has tremendous freedom as he's on the ship. And so as they're in Crete, ready to go to Rome, he tells the people, the Lord warned me that if we continue this journey, the ship, the cargo, everything will be lost, including lives. How many know that Paul heard from God and he was saying a prophetic truth? But here's the play. With all the prophecies that President Trump is going to be president, there's still human responsibility involved. And here's what happened. They made a choice, and what the centurion who was in charge, his name is Julius, who gave this tremendous favor to Paul, he listened to the captain of the ship. And the captain says, no, we can do it. We can make it. So he listened to the experts, the marketplace leaders. He didn't listen to the religious mountain. But how many of you know that apostles and prophets can speak into the government mountain and every mountain of society that he's raised? As Dr. King said, we're not over the state and the state's not over us as a church, but we're to be the prophetic voice for the state. And that's from Dr. Martin Luther King. And so the point I'm trying to make is that Paul gives a warning. It's a true prophetic warning, but human responsibility is in play. Just to give you an example, concerning Georgia, I don't know if you know that Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood, two attorneys who are high profile, are believers. In fact, Sidney Powell's son is not Sidney Powell's son, but Sidney Powell's assistant attorney, Jesse Banal, is the son of one of our HIM pastors here in Southern California. He grew up in the church. And so our HIM pastors had meals with Sidney Powell, and she has told me that she is an evangelical believer. So here's what Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood said. They said, don't vote for the Georgia election. Told the Trump followers and the conservatives and Republicans, don't vote, have a protest, because the system is broken. The fraud is systemic in the system, and you're going to get the same results as before. On November 3rd is going to be what's going to take place. And so she warned. But of course, people made their choices, including President Trump, who went down there to support the two candidates, Perdue and Loeffler. But as it turned out, they lost because the system was still broken. And so I don't want to go down that rabbit trail, but I'm trying to use that as an illustration of what Paul was dealing with. So he says the ship is going to be lost, but people still made a choice to go ahead. And so then, as they are in this major hurricane, and the crew hadn't eaten for 14 days, not because they were on a Lou Engle fast. It's not because there was a fast that Paul called. They were not eating because they're full of anxiety. They're just fighting for their lives, just trying to keep afloat. And what's amazing is our cargo ship full of grain and bread. That's the irony of the whole thing, because it was a ship from Egypt, which provided like 500,000 tons of grain every year to Rome to feed the Roman Empire. And so this is one of the ships that were a grain ship. And Paul says to them, he said, listen, God spoke to me, an angel appeared to me. So another prophetic word. An angel appeared to me that the ship will be lost, but all of you are going to be saved. And I want to encourage you to eat bread. So he takes the dry bread that is packed on the ship, because it was both grain and bread. He breaks it, gives thanks. He preaches the gospel. You just look at that text in Acts 26. Paul, how many know that he will never not take advantage of an opportunity to share the gospel? That's who he is. So he shares the gospel, he breaks bread, And I'm not saying they had wine, they had communion, but he gives thanks, he breaks bread, he shares. And sure enough, the ship is lost, but everyone's saved. What's the point? The election was lost, but people are going to get saved. We're going to see the greatest revival, the greatest harvest in the history of the church. And Paul's destiny was not sidetracked. That's right. Paul still ended up going before Caesar in Rome. There is a destiny for our nation. There's a destiny on your lives, and God's purposes and destiny will prevail in this nation. It may not turn out the way we wanted it. There was a plan A, but that got shipwrecked. And so God has a plan B. Now, I don't know what that plan is. I wish I could tell you. All I know, and I don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 days. But how many know that Jesus is still Lord? He is seated at the right hand of the Father. He is ruling and reigning. And when he died on the cross for your sins and my sins, he said, it is finished. And in Revelation 11:15, I've been quoting this so many times now, that this is to encourage you. This is not going to be after the second coming. I believe it's before the second coming. And I wish I had time to elaborate on this point. But the kingdom of this world will become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he will reign forever and ever. And that is what's happening. God still wants us to disciple nations. The knowledge of the glory of God is going to cover the earth as the waters cover the sea, Habakkuk 2:14. And by the way, when there's a new heaven, new earth in Revelation 21, there is no sea. So this is before the second coming of Jesus. Here's the point I want to make. Even though we don't understand what we're going through, God is sovereign. He's allowed the corruption, just the egregious fraud that took place during the election. We would never have known if he just became president on November 3rd. Everything is being exposed, and even you're seeing, and I've always said this, loyalty is tested in adversity. We're now seeing who are the loyal leaders were to President Trump. And you're just seeing those who are just politicians, who are just going with the wind. Wherever the wind would blow, they would just put their face to it. And they didn't have the kind of values and conviction and integrity that we're looking for. I thank God that I'm part of a church that is not going to vacillate, that we are people of values that are biblical, and we're going to see the greatest harvest. So I want to close with this. The harvest has begun. Those men got saved. Not only did they get saved, when they were in Malta, revival breaks out. You know, a snake comes, and by the way, Satan wants to kill the apostles. It says snake fastens on Paul's hand. He just shakes it off, and they know it's a poisonous snake. They know the island. They know what to avoid, and they're waiting for him to drop dead, but he doesn't drop dead. And then all of a sudden they think he's a god. He said, no, I'm not a god. But what happens is that revival breaks out because the leading citizen, Publius, that's his name, he says, my father's dying of dysentery. And of course, Dr. Luke puts that down specifically what his medical situation was, dysentery. And sure enough, he gets healed. They start bringing the sick people to him. Signs and wonders break out. Revival breaks out in Malta. And I'm telling you that the supernatural is going to break out like never before. And we're going to see a whole island get saved. It's a metaphor of a microcosm of seeing a nation getting saved. Come on. God's purpose is going to prevail. So here I am at the mall in front of the Washington Monument, looking over their lips, and I'm stuck. You know, wall-to-wall people. I mean, I can hardly budge. And so you're there waiting just even 2 hours just before someone even gets up on the pulpit and the program starts. So you're killing time. So you want to get to know the people around you. So I asked people around me, where are you from? What do you do? There are two pastors in front of me, which was wonderful. But then there was a guy who was next to me who was Japanese from Hawaii. He was a Buddhist. And there were two Catholics behind me that were not born again. They started asking me about what it means to be born again. I said, are you kidding me? This is so amazing. And so I share the gospel. Of course, the pastors know, and they're listening, and they're praying for me, actually, and affirming. And all three, the Japanese, the two Catholics, give their lives to Jesus Christ. It was so exciting. And now I'm flying home on Friday night, and the plane is packed. I think half of the plane, if not more, were all Trumpers, you know, who coming back from Washington, D.C. So I'm sitting next to a woman, and she tells me she's from Orange County. And the more I talk with her, she's married to a Jewish man. the more I realized she's not saved. You know how it is when you start and so I started to share the gospel, and she said, yeah, I know these Christians are wonderful. I'm Catholic. I grew up in the Catholic Church, but I don't know what this is all about. And so I share the gospel with her, and she begins to weep. And she ends up giving her heart to Jesus Christ right there on the plane. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, the harvest has begun. And I want to tell you where the harvest is at. The harvest is with the 75 million, if not 80 million, of those who voted for Trump. They have something in them that they know he's a pro-lifer. They have values that are similar, but they're not born again yet. I mean, we do know that 35 million are born again in America, but we're talking about 75 to 80 million, and there are a lot more out there. And they are so disappointed. They're brokenhearted over what happened this election. They are ripe. So I want to encourage you to reach out to your friends and family members who voted for Trump that are not saved. They are ripe for the gospel. The Spirit of God's moving upon them. And the billion soul harvest that Bob Jones prophesied, I believe, has started. And we're going to see a great revival, great harvest. And I still believe there's going to be transformation and reformation for our government and our nation. We got our work cut out. But now we know who to vote for, who not to vote for. And we now need to get more people registered, and the groundwork, the mechanics, all of that we still got to do. But I'm optimistic that the kingdom of this world will become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ.